communism spread, if you actually go back and look at it, I mean, this thing started with a book and it grew to control an enormous swath of the Earth's, surface, right? The USSR, China, Cuba, like this thing did appeal to people. It did, quote, win against, more practical philosophies. Why is that the case, right? And part of the reason is, it's not the only reason, there's several reasons. Part of that is the microeconomic incentives for communism, okay? So that's to say, if you were like a Jurgis Rudkis, do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, so from this book, Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle, right? If you go and read that book, you'll get a sense of what attracted people to communism. These guys were working in factories. They were going through this wrenching transition of the Industrial Revolution. They were alienated from their farms and their homes. Sometimes children were being worked really hard. There were disasters like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. And so much opprobrium was heaped on the unethical owner who had all this leverage and could, bankrupt you or, put you out of work. And, the family farm that you had wanted that was now being bankrupted by these big factories that, or big, industrial operations. You just couldn't make it as a family farm anymore, right? All those were real things. And so, what happened was some guy came into a factory and they basically say, we've got the answer, it's communism, and here's why. Here's what you gotta do. You build a union and do strikes, and then what you'll do? Everybody here will get some money. Why? Because you'll make that boss bend, that boss who's so powerful, all of us together are strong, and we'll make him bend, and now we all get raises. Whoa, oh my God, the strike worked, holy cow. And that would get reported in all the communist papers, and everybody would, raise their fist, oh, we did it. And then the hangover the next day or the next week or so would happen because you'd have union dues, right? That would actually be coming out of your paycheck. That was increased, now it's decreased. You have a second boss, which is like the union manager on top of the other manager, right? You suddenly have speech and thought controls. So Elia Kazan had this movie on this in the mid-20th century called On the Waterfront. You ever heard of it?
No.
Okay, worth watching simply to get a sense of that time and place, where basically you'd be canceled for totally different things, but essentially being disloyal to the union, or which could expand into lots of things, like working a little too hard, and trying to make us look bad, all of those kinds of things, right? You can start to see how that would be cause for cancellation, and you'd lose status among the other workers. And so the combination of all these things meant that your factory, your company became less competitive over time. But what you're basically doing with a strike is debiting from the future to build the present. Now, with that said, a strike is a pressure tactic. What the workers, the communist workers, thought was happening at that time, they thought it was a zero-sum situation where the boss would lose and they would win. It turned out to actually be a negative-sum situation where they were actually harming both parties over the long term, including themselves, by making the company less competitive. But they didn't understand that because they could only see it was a negative-sum situation with a short-term positive gain. It's like getting in a very high interest rate credit card kind of thing. You get the money today. It sort of tricks the psyche, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's like part of the microeconomics of it. The other aspect, of course, is the religious zeal. Nietzsche wrote in the late 1800s, quote, God is dead. And what he was observing was he wasn't actually inveighing against God in that particular epistle. He was basically saying, there's enough educated people who don't believe that there's going to be wars beyond imagining. People are going to look to fill effectively that God-shaped hole. And what a lot of people did is they filled their worship of God with GOV, right? With the government, right? The government can do everything, right? There's an ad a while back, which was government is the thing we all belong to, right? And so essentially people project onto it this monotheistic thing of the All-Father, right? The everything, Yeah. And so they basically, they're quote secular, but they actually believe in this thing as Green Lantern because it's like the most powerful thing, right? They literally worship, the government, right? So there's a second aspect in the vacuum of God, people projected all of this power onto this thing. Okay.